Two big international events were on our minds this week, the Gaza invasion and the downing of the MH17 over the Ukraine. I want to talk to you, David, first, David Shear, because you've had some experiences. Give us a picture of what is happening in Gaza in terms of the way people can't get out.
Yeah, I don't think people quite understand. I spent 4.5 years negotiating with the Israelis to get food and supplies into Gaza. This is the population of Auckland or more, crammed into a sort of 35k by 7 or 8k sort of space. It's completely surrounded by barbed wire and concrete pillboxes, and on the other side is the ocean. And effectively, everything that comes with it be electricity, food, people moving in or out, it is all controlled by the Israelis. And look, going into this place is like going into Paramaribo. There's huge concrete towers alongside you. You get checked. It was easier for me, obviously, because I was a UN official at the time, but for Palestinians, they stand in long lines, often in the middle of summer, waiting to get
Is that
through.
perhaps why these tunnels happen to ferry goods in and out? What are these tunnels for in that case?
The tunnels that went into Egypt were a direct response to the fact they just couldn't get enough food and supplies and various other things in. And for a long time, they had massive movement of supplies from Egypt, which is at the very south of the Gaza Strip, into the Gaza Strip. So they were able to supply themselves that way. Now with the change in government in Egypt, those tunnels have been closed off. So that has been closed off. The Israeli side has been closed off, and you've got 1.6 million people living in what can only be called the largest prison camp in the world.
All right, what about you, Louise Upson? Is there a message that we need to send to Israel, perhaps, or to both sides, but particularly Israel, since the deaths are so disproportionate, to say, what can we do from the New Zealand government's perspective, Louise?
Well, I think the main thing is there's, and if for those who listened to the debate in the House yesterday, uniformly there was just absolute horror at the level of deaths of civilians in that conflict.
Can we say something stronger, perhaps, to the Israeli ambassador, or to put sanctions on Israel? What do you think?
Yeah, and look, I leave those sorts of decisions obviously in the hands of the foreign minister who is working in this space, and I really appreciate the fact that David gave a very graphic picture of what it's like there, because I don't have
Eugenie, what about sanctions on Israel?
Yeah, I think that we should be looking at sanctions. Happened with South Africa. And also the UN...
Are you equating the situation here to South Africa?
Well, I think you've got a relationship there between the oppressed and the oppressor. And Israel, with its military might, is oppressing Palestine. We're never going to see peace there unless we fundamentally change that relationship. The United Nations has called for much more aid. This government should be giving at least $1 million more aid to Palestine, because the humanitarian crisis there is just appalling.
The bottom line here is that after this war is finished, it happened in 2008, 2012, and now 2014, every 2 years. And we go back to the same situation. We point at the fingers at who started it. Well, who started it? 1.6 million people living in a cage. I mean, what's going to happen to those people? What future have those young men got in order to sort of plan the rest of their lives? And then you understand the frustration that brings about conflict. I mean, unless that changes, we're not going to see any sort of reduction in the amount of conflict that's going on.
The other thing happened, of course, this happened in the same time span, didn't it? The downing of the MH17. And Louise, what's your thoughts on this? What sort of message does the New Zealand government need to send to the Russian, to Prime Minister Putin about this?
Oh, a very strong one. I mean, I've got constituents in Taupo that were directly affected with their parents being killed on that plane. So, it gets quite personal at that level. And when the sort of, borders of this Russian-Ukraine conflict have touched so many countries around the world...
What would you like to see happen?
Well, that's when, first and foremost, retrieving the bodies in a very respectful manner and making sure they are repatriated is important, but securing the site and making sure that a full and thorough investigation is undertaken. Well, you've got to undertake the investigation first and actually make sure that the evidence is collected as to who did this, and then take appropriate action. But if the environment's not secured and that investigation isn't done independently and thoroughly, well, there'll be no justice.
Eugenie, what do you think should happen then?
Well, I think it's people remembering the humanity of the situation. And if you contrast the women and children who are laying flowers by the graves, well, not by the graves, where they found the bodies, and people going back to that there is a human tragedy here, and the rebels, with their bullying and their intimidation, have forgotten that.